Let's jump right in. Today, we're doing a bit of a thought experiment. We're exploring a wildly realistic alternate timeline of a show that literally defined a generation. We all know the story of Friends, right? It's the absolute bedrock of 90s television. But in this explainer, we're taking off the rose-colored glasses. We're going to break down the actual mechanics of human connection by asking a very simple, honestly kind of heartbreaking question about our favorite New Yorkers.
So what if the 6 friends we know and love just never stayed together? And I don't mean they had some massive, dramatic, show-stopping blowout. Nobody's screaming, nobody's moving across the world. Well, okay, you know what I mean. I want you to imagine a scenario where they drifted apart simply because life happened. You hit your mid-20s and suddenly those daily check-ins just become a little less frequent. Eventually, they become people who used to mean everything to each other. Would they end up being the same people we remember? That is the ultimate universe we are mapping out today.
Because, let's be real, we all secretly want that ultimate TV fantasy. You know, that your chosen family stays together forever. 6 people, 1 city, and somehow endless free time to just hang out on a giant orange couch in a coffee shop in the middle of a workday. But reality? Yeah, reality hits a little differently. Friendships in the real world usually follow a much different path. People change, schedules get crazy, priorities completely shift. So what actually happens if the Friends universe had to play by the rules of our reality?
Well, let's map out exactly how this quiet drift happens, because growing apart, it rarely looks dramatic. It usually just looks normal. It starts on, say, a random Tuesday. Nobody actively pulls away. They just stop making time for those everyday coffee dates. Then, maybe months later, Monica is deep cleaning the apartment and finds an old group photo. A year goes by, and Ross suddenly realizes everyone's birthdays are passing without a surprise party or a flan. Rachel thinks to herself, "Oh, I really should text them," but she gets swamped at work. Joey assumes everyone's just too busy for him now. Chandler thinks reaching out of the blue would just be way too awkward. And years later, Phoebe is probably the one who sends a weird but incredibly heartfelt message and just waits. You see, nobody meant to let go.
Okay, so without the safety net of the group, what do these alternate timelines actually look like? Let's break down the completely different individual paths they take when that familiar dynamic is removed.
The first shift happens pretty quietly with Monica. Without the chaos of hosting the group every single night, she gets intensely, laser-focused on her career. Those long hours in the kitchen, they turn into heavy management responsibilities. And honestly, she's just constantly exhausted. Rachel goes down a totally different road. Instead of finding herself inside that familiar, cozy circle, she throws herself completely into the fashion world. Networking events at Ralph Lauren quickly replace movie nights at the apartment. Then there's Ross. He gets totally consumed by his academic career, spending all his time proving himself at the museum, obsessing over dinosaur exhibits instead of maintaining his old routines. And Chandler? Man, this one's tough. His signature sarcasm was always a tool for connection, a defense mechanism tracing all the way back to his parents' divorce, right? Take away his audience, and he becomes much more private. He actually hides the humor that used to be the glue for the whole group.
Meanwhile, Joey faces a really harsh reality check. Without his daily hype squad, the brutal world of acting becomes significantly lonelier. Every single audition rejection feels so much heavier, and the wins just feel smaller. And Phoebe? Well, because of her chaotic upbringing, she actually adapts the fastest. Her personality naturally accepts change, and she effortlessly builds new communities wherever she wanders. But even with all that resilience, she deeply, deeply feels the absence of her core group.
Now here is a really interesting thought. Would their lives actually be worse? Not necessarily. The friction of real life might actually force them to grow up way faster. Think about it. Rachel might discover her true independence much faster without relying on Monica's apartment as a crutch. Ross might build real, intrinsic confidence outside of needing the group's constant approval. Monica would literally be forced to create stronger work-life boundaries just to survive her own exhaustion. Joey would have to learn serious resilience much earlier in his acting career. And Chandler, he might actually have to confront his emotions head-on instead of just hiding behind a punchline. Phoebe, of course, would likely just keep evolving exactly as herself.
However, even with all that accelerated individual growth, they would be losing something massive. It's a vital psychological concept known as the mirror. See, friend groups do something incredibly powerful. They literally reflect versions of ourselves back to us. It's a phenomenon that fosters profound personal growth. And it really makes you stop and think about the true value of the people in your own contact list right now. We don't just hang out with our friends to kill time.
We subconsciously use them to understand who we are.
In the original timeline, through the power of this mirror, Rachel became braver, largely because these 5 people believed in her. Chandler learned emotional openness because people actually stuck around, even when his defense mechanisms were firing on all cylinders. Monica learned balance. Ross learned humility. Joey learned the absolute true meaning of loyalty. And Phoebe finally found consistency in a life that had historically been totally chaotic. Without this constant reflection from the group, sure, their individual growth still happens, like we saw in the alternate timeline, but it happens entirely differently. And almost certainly it happens much, much slower.
So, this brings us to the absolute emotional climax of our alternate universe. After all this time, all this distance, and all this isolated personal growth, would they ever actually reconnect? Or is the drift permanent?
Realistically, yeah, they probably would. Not because friendships just magically freeze in time, but because truly meaningful connections always leave traces. Eventually, someone bridges the gap. Maybe Monica gets a sudden burst of nostalgia and decides to host just one dinner, years later. Maybe Ross sends out a random invitation to a new museum exhibit. Maybe Joey finally books that huge, life-changing role and celebrates by texting the oldest numbers in his phone. Or maybe Rachel simply walks into a random coffee shop and locks eyes with familiar faces. Suddenly, nobody can even remember exactly when they stopped talking, but they instantly remember exactly why they cared.
It shows us that sometimes friendship survives distance, and sometimes it just completely changes shape. It reveals a really powerful truth. Sometimes the people who knew you best become the people who help you remember who you actually are. That is a brilliant summary of why those deep, formative relationships hold so much weight in our lives, no matter how many years go by.
You see, the timeless nature of Friends isn't that 6 people somehow managed to stay flawlessly connected forever without a single hitch. It's that, deep down, we know they kept choosing each other, again and again, even when life got messy and complicated. Not everyone from one chapter of your life stays for the whole story, but the people who really matter, they almost always find their way back. It's an incredibly comforting thought when you look at the messy reality of adult friendships.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to think about this alternate timeline and apply it to your own circles. Think about the people you might have drifted from over the years. And looking back at our 6 favorite New Yorkers, I gotta ask, which one of the 6 do you think would actually be the first to reach out and break that silence? Let me know your thoughts on this. Keep learning, keep connecting, and I will catch you in the next explainer.